Hey friends, Seeking Our Spirits back with another great episode. Got to catch up with a old friend of mine and sister in ministry, my friend Amy Avery, all the way across the country. It was a great conversation. She's got a great story, so it was great to catch up with her. She's the first guest that has reached out to me to be on the show, and that's what I need you guys to do. So if you want to be on the show, or if you know somebody who would be great on the show, contact me at seekingourspirit@gmail.com. As always, also you can contact me there if you're interested in spiritual direction. Hit the like button, the share button, support button, all those things. And I hope you enjoy. Take care. And we're rolling, Miss Amy Avery. Like I was just saying, it's such a joy to reconnect with you because we have been friends and partners in ministry at one time, and then you guys moved away, and we've lost touch. But was so happy that you reached out to do this podcast and go on this journey with me. So welcome and wonderful to reconnect with you. And why don't yeah, well, and I know a lot of people that listen to this show will know you, so that's awesome. But for folks that don't know you, why don't you just start by saying a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, and then we'll dive in.
So I'm Amy Avery. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, but lived an equal amount of time in Knoxville and really kind of consider it my adult home. I served for 5 years at the Church of the Ascension as the children's minister. Then we moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, and I served there for almost 5 years as the children's minister. And then we moved to Berkeley. Well, we live just outside of Berkeley, California, in Orinda, California, but I am also the children, youth, and family minister here at a church called St. Clement's.
Awesome.
So that's me in a little nutshell.
Yeah. And mom of two, one who just went to college, right, on the other side of the country. Is that right?
Yeah. So 2 daughters, one at Barnard College, Columbia, in New York. So yeah, that's kind of different.
Yeah, definitely. Well, awesome. Okay, well, so let's dive in. And as you know, in this show, we sort of journey with people through their story, their spiritual story as they see it. So I sort of call that spiritual timeline. So for you, Amy Avery, where would you enter into that when you think about your spiritual life as you've known it? Was that childhood? Was that, where do you enter into that? What's the first recollection you have of what you would call quote unquote spiritual?
Yeah. So I think, my first awareness began in childhood, just if I think about it now, I think about it as in the things that I noticed, like light coming in from a window as a little child, or my grandmother being with her, and just, the safety that I felt in being loved and unconditionally. And I say that because my parents divorced early when I was little, like 2 years old. And so we moved from where I was born in Georgia back to Memphis, where my mom and my dad were both from. But, there was even early in life, I had a feeling of uncertainty, instability. And so just, the things that of nature that really grounded me, just like clover in the grass. And like I said, playing in the lake, and my grandmother, made me feel really an unconditional love. And I think those were touchstones from God. Like, If I think about it now, I feel that was God holding me, even as a young child. I felt that presence of things are going to be okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that I became more aware of like who God was until I entered first grade, and I was 6 years old, and I entered Catholic schools, and my family was Baptist. So it was quite a different place to be in a Catholic school, and also go to church and Wednesday stuff in the Baptist church. There were two different faith backgrounds, and
Yeah.
so that was really where I feel like I started to notice human differences as far as faith practices, but somehow I really knew that God was the same in both places.
Mm.
Like the overarching person that we were worshiping was the same,
Hmm.
even though the places were different.
That's interesting.
Um,
So, I mean, just back in the first responses there. So, as I always talk about, like language is sort of how God speaks to us. So, I heard nature, and I heard relationship, sort of relationship with others. And then what's really interesting about what you just said is, so you were from an early age seeing. Um, in a way, it's sort of an example of like what this show's about, right? So you were seeing that there are different um, expressions of God, or there are different ways that people experience God, and you were witnessing both of those as a child. And that's interesting.
I think too, like, I it has taken me to the age that I am now to like really kind of like unravel some of the things that were imprinted upon me. For instance, because I went to Catholic schools, when I was in second grade, I was not allowed to receive communion.
Hmm.
I knew I'd been going to religion classes because that's, all classes do religion. And so I was very interested. I was taught by nuns and I revered my teachers. They were these nuns, Sister Madeline, Sister Bernadine. They were, to me, they were pieces of really God incarnate. I mean, to me, they were so loving, so nurturing, so caring.
Hmm.
There was another lady too that was one of my teachers. She was not a nun, Miss Lanigan. And those teachers, they did not see me as a non-Catholic, even though I was, and they treated me just the same. And I felt then that God called me to the table too.
Hmm.
And at that, I look back now and I think at that same time, I decided I wanted to be baptized in the Baptist church. And I do remember I would pray about it as this little child. And I had a Sunday school teacher named Miss Lisa. I loved her. And we would pray about it. And one day I heard God say, I call you forward, come and be baptized. And I wanted that. And um, I was a shy little child. And so going and talking in front of the whole entire Baptist congregation and telling them I
Yeah.
wanted to be baptized, that was the first time I felt that that was God's strength. God's strength pulled me forward to tell others that I wanted to be baptized and to go forward in that way.
Mm. I love the example of I mean, it's just such a reminder to me. So, like, there you go with the teachers and their influence in your life, and so again, our experiencing God or God's love through others is a powerful theme. But it's just such a clear reminder, because I think we can forget, or at least I can forget, or I can downplay this a lot, of just the power um, of others' influence, the power of others accepting us, loving us, welcoming us, and how that can shape and affect truly people's lives. I mean, that sounded like such a defining experience for you. And then that just makes me also think about then just like church work now or ministry now, and I just think I downplay that so much. And when the truth is, to your example, like, no, welcoming someone into our community, we have no idea how powerful and impactful that can be. So I don't know. It's a great example. So from there, so you're baptized now, and that's what you said about first grade.
I was in second grade at that point,
Okay.
that I got baptized. And I think it really was, really was that I wanted to be baptized, but also I felt this really like strong desire to know more about God. In my school, I watched the Catholic priests do mass. We went to mass. We went to mass a lot. I think we went to mass like 4 days a week.
Yeah.
I don't think they do that anymore, but we went to mass 4 days a week. I think that the only day we didn't go to mass was on Tuesday, but every other day we went to mass. So I was like being, versed over and over in the whole, everything that happened out there. And we, as a second grader, we were on the front rows of the church, the front pews, and having to kneel like little soldiers because children kneeling on kneelers is hard. But just that whole like bodily experience of sitting there watching it all
Hmm.
made me feel it was a very holy place. And I wanted to know more about God. I knew that God called to me
Hmm.
and wanted to have a relationship with me. And that was really, at this time too. So I will backtrack just a tiny bit. My parents remarried when I was 4 and got re-divorced when I was 6. So 6 was the age that I'm entering Catholic schools. Um, and it's a kind of tumultuous kind of little experience for me because
Sure.
I loved my parents so much and missed, my parents when I wasn't with them. Then I had the experience of going to the Catholic schools and the Baptist church, and those places were places of constant, like I don't consistency. I don't know what the right
Yeah.
constancy. I can't think of the right word, but they were a stable place for me. I knew what was expected of me. I knew it wasn't changing, even though the two places were different. And I was having truth really spoken over me. Like I understood why I couldn't receive communion. That made sense to me. And I also understood that there was something for me in a different place too.
Hmm.
Um, so it was a really kind of formational time for me. I was really engaged with God.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it sounds like it. And so, like in that time, like you mentioned, you began to sort of talk to God and pray to God about your baptism, for example. Like, how did that? How did your well, I guess as you move forward from there, from being baptized, and then how did that relationship continue with God? I guess did those themes of nature and other people continue? Were there other sort of themes that pop up? What did you start to develop a more internal relationship, sort of like you named? You felt pulled, or you were actively seeking. What did that start to look like later as you move on?
As I moved on, I remember that my parents were very supportive of me and what I wanted to do as far as church wise. So as I got older and I became more and more um, in- involved because of the fact that my friends were Catholic, I became more and more involved with the Catholic Church. I wanted to be Catholic. I wanted to be able to experience the entire fullness of receiving communion and participating in the liturgy. I remember in 8th grade, we had our 8th grade graduation, and this is where my teacher, Miss Lanigan, comes in. She chose me to read one of the readings, and that was kind of unheard of for to have a non-Catholic at this time. I mean, it's not that way anymore. The
Hmm.
Catholic Church has progressed a lot as far as being ecumenical and everything, but at that point, it was unheard of, and so she chose me to read, and I couldn't believe it. I was just like, that was such a major thing. I was being chosen to participate in this service, this mass, and I still remember what I wrote. It was from Jeremiah. um, what I read, rather, not wrote, and it just. I remember reading up there in front of the entire church and just feeling energized. Like I felt God's presence there. I was not nervous. I was excited and thrilled to just be a part of this place and everything that I'd seen for 8 years. As and that's a lot of time for a child. Like 8 years now. 8 years is as long as I've been gone from Knoxville.
Yeah. Yeah.
8 years to a child is like an eternity. And
Yeah.
so, that I had been immersed in that world for that long length of time, and it was very formative. But then I became Catholic in high school. I went through the RCIA classes, and I always joked that I could have taught the classes because
Because you
everything
learned
I'd
so much.
learned,
Yeah.
from first through 8th grade, I knew it all. I knew the catechism. I knew all of the stuff. It was just a matter of getting that stamp, so to
Right.
speak, that you are Catholic now. You can receive communion. I got confirmed by, I don't even remember who bishop was, but I got confirmed on Easter at the Easter Vigil. And um, that was really an amazing time for me because I had chosen it.
Hmm.
I chose to be Catholic, and I felt that God wanted me there.
Hmm. What I don't want to at all put sort of put words in your mouth, but and this is probably just because I know you, so I know at least more of your later story. But like um, that little snippet that you gave there of going and reading and being in front of the congregation and sort of leading or being a part of it, I just heard a little tiny hint there of like, would you call that maybe one of your first little nuggets of sense of calling?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I've really been exploring this. So, not to fast forward too much, but, here I am, an Episcopalian.
Yeah.
So, where did that come from? um, when I went to college at UT, I I would go to John the 23rd there on campus, but I'd also go to the Tyson House. I'm just kind of exploring a little bit. And Hallie and I, my husband, my husband, but
Yep.
other people might not. Howie,
And for people who
he
don't
grew
know, the Tyson House is the Episcopal Lutheran campus ministry at UT. Yeah.
um, Howie grew up in the Jewish faith, and his family was Jewish, and we met at UT. He's from New York City, um, and we met at UT. We were RAs. That's how we met. And he was the antithesis of any person I'd ever dated. No, he was not a Southern guy. He had a very strong New York accent. He was like, "I'm Howie from New York." It was, I can't do it like, that. But he was, just this totally different guy. and we became friends as RAs. But then later, of course, we dated and we got engaged. And I wanted to get married at, and I shouldn't say where I wanted to get married because, well, I'll say it. I wanted to get married at Sacred Heart. And I went and talked to the Monsignor at the time, and he said, no. He said he has to convert.
Hmm.
And I was like, no.
Yeah.
I got to choose myself. I got to choose. I'm not forcing my fiance to convert to Catholicism or Christianity. And so I looked across the street, and up on the hill was Ascension. And I was like, let's go over there. So we did. We went over, and now the priest we talked to, his name is escaping me. So that's not important. But I think they were in a time of transition too at that time. But we went over there, and they're like, yeah, come to church, come to church and see what you think.
Hmm.
So we did, and we went through the inquirer's classes there. This was not at the time of Father Howard. He came later.
Hmm.
So we went through the inquirer's class there, and I was totally moved. I was like, I want to be an Episcopalian. This is where we're going to get married. And we did. Gordon Temple married us because Ascension was in a time of rector transition. So Gordon was there as an
Interim.
whatever you call that, priest. And he married us. And that started our walk in the Episcopal Church, which we got married 25 years ago this past May. And a couple of years before that. So we've been in the Episcopal Church for at least 27 years.
Yeah. What a cool thread there. I never knew that either. So some of those details, but so like I see the same theme happening there, right? Like the thread that you were talking about, of which you named, that you got to choose, and that was something that was powerful for you. And so just being conscious of that and wanting that for Howie as well, regardless of what he chooses. And so that's beautiful. But then also the same theme of welcome and inclusion and acceptance is there again, right, with you. So whereas you experienced welcome and inclusion and acceptance in the Catholic Church and in the Baptist Church as a young girl, and then it's like a new chapter that then you experience that welcome and inclusion as a couple in the Episcopal Church. And I don't know, just sort of a neat thread, sort of really makes sense. So
yeah, and I really do feel that it was here's the thing, is like I have a cousin who's a missionary, and she said denominations are just really kind of like your favorite pair of jeans, whatever fits you best.
mhm.
They're all, the Christian faith. And so I kind of just felt like this is where God was leading us.
Mhm.
And as a family, as a new couple, we didn't know that we'd have a family yet. We hope to.
Yeah.
But, that's where I felt. It was just funny because I looked out the window over there at Sacred Heart. This was before the cathedral.
Yeah.
John Norma's over there. I looked out that window and just saw Ascension on the hill. And I was just like, and I knew enough at the time that the Episcopal Church was liturgically like the Catholic Church. I had no idea that the feeling that I would have, it felt like a place of home. Like I felt like both of my worlds, Baptist and Catholic, were just meshed into this one neat little place. It felt really like I came home.
Yeah.
Like that was where I was meant to be.
Yeah. That's interesting too. Yeah, I never even really thought about that, but yeah, that it is. I mean, the Episcopal Church sort of being this middle way for a lot of people, but I didn't even think about that for you, having grown up in both of those contexts. Yeah, that's interesting. So okay, so marriage, Episcopal Church, then where do you go from there? Or is there anything sort of internally or experientially with God outside of what you've already named?
So you had asked about my sense of call earlier, and I've really been thinking about that a lot lately as far as how God has called into my world. Like, so I will go back a little bit to college, and when I was in college, I had this idea that I was going to be something. Um, I wanted to be a pediatrician, be a doctor, and I just knew it. I had to be it. I was going to do it. I was going to, I was forcing myself through all these classes. Sorry, my dog is having a little bit of an attack. If you can hear that,
Oh, that's fine.
sorry. And I would go to these classes and I would go and do internships. I did internships at Fort Sanders. I did internships all over the place in Knoxville. And I just what I was also doing was I was volunteering in the schools. I loved it. I loved being a teacher. I loved being in those places. But I was like, no, I don't want to be a teacher. It's not what I want to be. They don't make enough money. That's not my calling. And the entire time I'm doing this, forcing myself through all these classes, I feel that God is saying, hey, I want you to be a teacher. I'm like, no, I'm putting like careers in a hat and making my little sisters, I have two little sisters, draw out what my career choice is going to be. And, I had in there teacher, pediatrician, physical therapist, all these different things.
Huh.
And I was stacking the deck for me. They would pull out teacher every time. I'm like, darn it.
Oh, man.
Why'd you pull it? Finally, so all this time I'm taking Spanish classes too because I loved Spanish. My parents used to live in Spain, and so I was taking these Spanish classes, and it got to a point where I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of college. And the quickest way out for me was to get a degree in Spanish, but I'd also been taking classes in education. And I said, fine, God, fine, I'll be a teacher. Well, after that, everything just opened up. Like all of it opened up. I became a bilingual teacher. We moved from Knoxville. We were in Arizona, Oregon, Texas, and I was this bilingual teacher. And I have never in my life felt so much joy, so much like amazing power outside of myself. I loved, and I get tears thinking about it. Mm-hmm. I loved working with those families, with those children, and these families. A lot of the families were immigrants that were, they had crossed the border legally. And I say that because people don't realize that when the kids are in a public school system, they have to have papers, they have to be, have some legality about them. So these parents who are hardworking parents had their kids enrolled in all these different schools. In Arizona, it was a little bit different of a situation than in Oregon. Oregon, it was a lot of migrant worker kids. And, you just see like these people that are so hardworking and know that they are trying to have a better opportunity of life for their kids. And in Oregon, I remember we got there. I didn't have a job yet because we had just moved from Phoenix. And I was praying about this one school called Highland Elementary. I wanted to be there because they had a Spanish-speaking population. And this job just opened up like 2 weeks into school. And I talked to the principal there, Ruby Price, and she hired me, and it was just awesome being there. I mean, the children that I taught and the families I worked with. And I remember this lady had a baby, and she didn't speak any English. I spoke only Spanish to these kids. And she came and she wanted la maestra to hold her baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, and it was the most holy moment. I will say, hands down. I'm getting teary eyed thinking about it. It was the most holy moment I've ever had in teaching, because that was like, it was like the mark of, having the teacher was like having, they revere teachers. And so la maestra, me, to get to hold this beautiful newborn baby, and that they wanted, it was like a blessing. They wanted me to bless this baby. And so there was that, this like tangent of that. Excuse me, I don't mean to be so teary eyed.
It's all right.
But from there, that was just a beautiful year. I had the best year. We moved to Austin, Texas, and again, I was a bilingual kindergarten teacher. 3 of the best years of my life.
Yeah.
And then
I just gotta interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry, but I gotta put a pin in also, like, that story. It's just so cool because I just keep seeing you really have these threads sort of running throughout your entire story. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but that moment sort of feels in the same way, like these threads that keep popping up. Because they're almost like the moment of reading in the church. I can see sort of this convergence of it's like teaching, leading, right, but also spiritually, right? So teaching, leading in faith formation, essentially, right? And then also in that moment with that child, you have that same theme too of the acceptance, right? You're teaching, you're leading, and then she and this community are accepting you, right, for who you are, and accepting you into their culture and their community. But also that sort of, like you named it, almost like a blessing. Like, so it's like you weren't just teacher. I don't know if that makes sense as I'm saying it, but I just sort of see these themes and threads intersecting even in that story. So I just needed to say it.
No, it's true. I appreciate you pointing that out, because if I want to fast forward a little bit through into, we lived in Texas and we moved back to Knoxville, and I sought out, when I moved to Knoxville, I sought out the place that would need me the most as far as a bilingual teacher, which was Loudoun.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a job teaching in Loudoun County at Loudoun Elementary School, all of the mushroom plant children of those workers. And that was a really special time too. Then I had my first child, and I knew that we lived in West Knoxville. I was driving to Loudoun every day. It's not too bad of a drive, but I didn't want to take my little baby.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take my baby that far from my baby. So I prayed about that, and she had a spot at Sacred Heart Preschool. So here I've gone back to Sacred Heart. And they had an opening for a teacher in second grade. And that's a real big deal that I got that job being a second grade teacher, because it's a sacramental year. So I see this as a full circle kind of moment. Like, this is for me, huge. Because I didn't get to receive first reconciliation or first Holy Communion, but here I was getting to teach these kids about it.
Yeah. And there's that, like, you're falling into almost an opportunity that is, again, leading, teaching, but is also spiritually focused, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the years that I was at Sacred Heart, my window. So I know you know the school. Well, the school at the time, of course, there was the old church, um, and my window looked across the street at Ascension, so I could see Ascension
Yeah.
across the street every day. And I had the best class that first year, and I only was there 2 years. I had two really amazing classes. I'm still in touch with a lot of those wonderful adults now, and I really those were that was another kind of coming home and being accepted for who I was as me,
Hmm.
but back in my like Catholic school kind of setting.
Yeah.
um, it felt really natural to be there, and I was embraced by those families and those kids most of all. And it was just uh, those were my last 2 years of teaching, because I brought my baby in, and then I was my second year I was pregnant with my second child, and by the time she was going to be born, Sacred Heart needed to go down to 2 second grades, and I was just like, I'll just take a year off.
Mm.
Well, I didn't just take a year off. I was asked to be um, a at the time, Amy Morehouse was coming in as the Christian education, or I don't know what we called it then, but basically the formation minister.
Hmm.
And she was also a deacon in our church. And so she had to serve on the altar. And so I was asked to be the assistant person to work with the children.
Right.
And that's where my ministry in church started
Uh-huh.
and has continued.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
also, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm being redundant, but it's just so funny because even all those instances I already named, that threads there, like it was teaching ministry, right? Even though you weren't in the church. So
Right. Like that's true. Like, it's always been, God has led me through to be like, I've always been drawn to teachers and God and to, all of it. So, in my time at Ascension, I started to feel a call to ordain ministry, as you know, but others don't. And I did go through the discernment process a couple of times. Once for the diaconate, and I was told, no, that sounds like preschool. And I'm like, no. Uh-uh. And so I got out of that discernment process, continued in spiritual direction, and re-entered into a new process, was accepted in the Diocese of East Tennessee as a postulant, and then we moved. And that was really hard.
yeah.
Um, and I want to talk a little bit about that piece, because I entered a place where I think was, it was a place of deep grief. Living in Virginia was hard. The people are nice, but they weren't my people from Knoxville. Knoxville in and of itself to me was like a place of complete acceptance, complete love, complete home.
Mm.
Just being in Knoxville and leaving there, I didn't realize would be such a place of grief, but it was. And I entered into a place that was so deep in grief that I didn't feel like I could go forward into to go to seminary. I put my postulancy status on hold, and I just kind of was going into a spiral downward.
Yeah.
Mentally, spiritually, all that kind of stuff. And one day, this person that worked with Howie, his wife was supposed to be to start working as the children's minister at Christ Episcopal Church. We had been attending another Episcopal church that was wonderful, called St. Paul's Ivy. She called me and she said, "Hey, there's this job at Christ Church. I can't do it. I want to still teach. Would you mind if I gave them your name?" I said, "Oh, of course. No, please do." This was in March of 2016 after we had moved from Knoxville. So I went and met with the rector, Paul, there, and I visited the church and I took the job. And the first Sunday that I came on as the children's minister there, we were driving up the hill and I see this person walking up the hill and I'm like, "Howie, is that Christopher Hogan?" I said, "Stop the car." And it was Christopher
What?
walking up the hill at Christ Church on my very first Sunday. I'm like, "What are you doing here?"
So for people, so people who are listening and aren't from Knoxville and aren't from Ascension, yeah. So Christopher Hogan is a young man. He's not a young man. Sorry, Christopher. He grew up at Ascension, this place we're talking about. Moved away, eventually became a priest, and is now back at Ascension. But so okay, sorry. So what was he doing there?
Well, he was visiting Charlottesville and one of his seminaries at Christ Church. And so he was visiting the church to say hello to Willis and everything. But just so happened, I say that, that because as Mother Howard always says, there are no coincidences with God. And I was like, it was just like God saying, "Hey, I got you.
Yeah.
It's okay. I got a piece of home right here at this place where you're going to be. I got you."
Wow, that's awesome.
So I did. I worked at Christ Church with hundreds of children, literally. It's a very vibrant young families church. And while I was there, what I realized in being there, everyone was wonderful and loving and caring. I was still in a place of shame because I felt like I was disappointing people by not going forward. I felt disjointed because I was not in Knoxville. I felt a place of like I was in shame place. This was all on myself. I did this to myself. But I knew that what was getting me through was this gift that God gave me in teaching children about him.
Yeah.
And so every Sunday, there I was with all these beautiful children and families, and they were holding me as I was in this place of grief. They were holding me, and God was holding me through them. And that was, I learned a lot about God's grace, God's love, about the fact that it wasn't me that needed to perform for God. It was God who gave me those gifts to be what he wanted me to be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was given opportunities to preach in children's sermons. And there again, that just filled me with this piece of joy. And I would be sitting on the chancel steps with all the kids all around me. And I learned that I didn't need to memorize something just to let the Spirit speak through me.
Mm-hmm.
And people would come up to me that I'd never even seen, because you can't really see everybody out in the church congregation. They would say, "Oh, you're the girl with the voice," because of my accent.
Yeah.
Because people in Charlottesville, they really don't have an accent. Well, they do. Some Virginians do have accents, but there's a lot of people that are not from Virginia that live in Charlottesville. So that was a real, I feel that was like a place of...
Sounds like healing.
it was a place of healing, but also I felt like it was a place of dying to self
Hmm.
and being resurrected, being held by God, being I don't know, reformed in my mind, and in my heart space. And so I don't want to like fast forward too much because, we're talking about the spirituality of it all. Um, when we moved here to California, I could not wait to get here. I don't know why, but I just felt like this real like desire to be here. It was a hard, our girls were high school, middle school.
Yeah.
So that was a hard decision. And it was COVID.
Yeah.
COVID had hit. And so we moved across country. And I thought I'd never work in a church again. I was like, okay, this is it. I'm done. Not because I didn't want to, but because I thought there's no way. And one night I couldn't sleep and I got up and I was like, I'm going to look on Diocese of California's website. And there was this position that was there for a children, youth, and family minister. And I said, I'm going to send in my application. So I did, typed up my application, sent it in. And Bruce, he's the rector of St. Clement's, called me the next day. He said, I just posted that. You answered this, and I had just posted it that evening.
Oh, weird.
I'm like, really?
That's crazy.
So I, of course, took that position, and that's what I do now, children, youth, and family minister at St. Clement's. But, when we had come to visit here, excuse me, we had stayed in this hotel called the Claremont Hotel. And I had taken a picture. We could see the Golden Gate Bridge out our window we're in the East Bay, so I could see the Golden Gate Bridge out in the bay. I took this picture, and I later was looking at that picture, and right below it is St. Clement's.
Below
I
the
didn't know
bridge?
that. No, right
Or like
below
from where you were?
Claremont Hotel. So you can see the church in the foreground.
Wow.
And I had no idea until later, I was looking for some California pictures that I'd taken. I was like, oh, I know that picture. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's St. Clement's. And I didn't even know I'd be working there
So
when we were first looking. So it just affirmed to me, God goes before, God is always behind, God is with us at all these kind of junctures. And, I could go on about that, but I'm sorry I'm fast forwarding because I know
no,
I know we
you're
need
good.
to wrap up in a second, but I want to wrap it up by just saying to the spirituality of it all. I thought, okay, this is a time that I could go to seminary. There's a seminary right here, right in my backyard. I contacted the bishops that be, 3 bishops, and the bishop of the Diocese of California right now is Bishop Mark Andrews, and he's from East Tennessee.
Yeah.
And
His sister goes to my church.
see,
Yeah.
and he's wonderful. I just think he's just wonderful. And they had approved me to come through and go to CDSP. Again, though, I felt this like overwhelming, like this is, I don't know that I can do this. And I took myself out of seminary and thought, okay, that's it. I'm supposed to be a children's minister. That is what God has called me to. This is my calling, is to be in children, youth, and families, period. No other things. And then I became a Eucharistic minister again because we started serving wine again. And those experiences, and also was invited to participate in baptismal things. Those 2 experiences brought me to complete um, just tears. I couldn't stand up there without crying, watching all these people coming up and receiving communion.
Hmm.
And so I've re-entered another discernment process, and I finally have come to a place. And you kept saying this, and I'm thankful you kept saying this, of acceptance. I accept myself in this call. I think that sometimes in our spiritual journeys, it's not about who else accepts us, it's about us accepting God's call and believing
Mm.
God's call of us, and knowing. I know you always say that you just couldn't let go of something was had you hooked, and you just had to say yes. That's how it's been for me too, like with the teaching, and
Yeah.
then this too.
Yeah.
It has a hold of me, and it was about me accepting it and
Hmm.
saying yes.
Yeah. Well,
I
that's
believe
awesome.
it.
I didn't know that. So congratulations. And that's awesome and beautiful. Uh, and I'm excited for you there. Yeah, a couple of things in some of the story there. Again, not to be repetitive and redundant, but acceptance. Like again, that was so strong there, like you said, in that place in Virginia, of getting held there. Right there again, that theme of accepting you, and then about call. You described this moment. I actually can't even remember what moment you were referring to, but you described this moment. Oh, well, it was when you made the shift to teaching, where everything just opened up and like connected, and then you've seen that for the rest of your story, really, just things falling into place, and that's just exactly right in terms of what I described my call as. Like once I accepted, that though I didn't want to do it, once I accepted it, everything lined up. Everything was like, oh yeah, this is what's all been pointing to the entire time. And so I don't know, just naming that because I think that's a uh, I don't know. I don't hear people speak of their call, whether that to be ordained ministry or whatever their call is, in that way a lot. And so but that was just very clear for me. It not to get too like hippy dippy, but I mean, it really is almost like when you're on the right path, the universe is affirming that. And things, the doors are opening and the connections are being made. And sometimes maybe an indicator of it not being the right path is when, things aren't falling into place. So it's I don't know. So I just saw that very clearly there in your story, and continues to be there for you. So
Yeah, and I think that too. Through I see this whole, like, I we're all children of God, and so like all of us have a particular call.
sure.
Everyone has a call. What the number one call is that we are children of God, and our purpose is to be light and love in the world. And I think that's the one thing that that I've learned in my own journey, is that it doesn't matter what the world is stamping on you, all the imprints. There's always whatever you feel like that is turning you away from what the world says
Hmm.
about you is probably the spirit. Like if you feel like a stamp of something that doesn't feel right, and you feel called to something, different, but you're like, the world is saying, no, I'm not so sure about that. Um, and really, it's God. God is pulling you forward, and God makes that way. I've learned that it's not by my power, and if it is in my power, then it's probably not the right way. Like if it's my will
Sure.
pulling me forward, I think I mean by that too is like that can be like even the fear factor. That's my will.
Hmm.
Living in fear is me living there.
Hmm.
But it's through God's power that I could step out of the fear. One of my prayers lately has just been, help me in my disbelief.
Hmm.
And I think that, there's a story I just read recently, and, Jesus heals the man's son who had like a spirit in him and he was foaming at the mouth. But he says, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do? And the man says, if you can do it. And he said, if you can do it. And I think that's just such a really neat juxtaposition. He says, if you can do it, meaning you have to let go
Hmm.
and let God do it. And the man, of course, says, I believe, help me in my disbelief. I think that's a key component to the spiritual aspect of our lives, is just remembering that it's only through God's power that we're able to be his light and love in the world. It's not through our own efforts.
Sure.
Yes, we're working towards it,
Right. Right. And
but
that's
it's God's power doing it in us.
right. And that's a messy, convoluted thing, of course, distinguishing between the two. I know we got to be sensitive of your time here, but I want to make sure I ask the same question I ask of everybody, which you may have already named, but do you have like the one most powerful or significant, quote unquote, spiritual experience of your life? Do you have a story that you would point to? We probably, maybe we have to do another episode sometime, but there's a whole other aspect of your spiritual life that I know of um, that we didn't even touch, or like a language that I think God uses to speak to you too, which is like dreams, and dreams and vision and stuff. So obviously can't really touch that right now, but just wanted to name that. But so do you have like just a story that's to you the most spiritual experience you've ever had, meaningful?
For me, I guess, talking about, well, let me say this. It's not just one experience, it's in a lot of experiences. Being able to teach kids in Spanish was a spiritual experience for me because it's not my first language. And so when I spoke to them and their families, it was through a power that was not my own. It just, I was able to do it not because, I mean,
Yeah.
I did learn, but just being able to have that confidence to speak to them, that was a power not my own. I say the same in teaching and preaching. I do a children's chapel every week. I heard Christy Starks talk about speaking in tongues, and the way she said it really kind of made sense to me, because it's not about speaking a different language, but just speaking without thinking too much about it, about the gospel. So that sounds a little odd.
No.
When I give a children's lesson, I've read it and I've prayed about it, but I ask God to be the words in me to say it. And I'm always amazed by it, because I'm not amazed by myself. I'm not saying that. I'm amazed at the words that come out of my mouth that have been inspired in my mind to say. And that is a very spiritual experience for me, because it's not me,
Right.
it's God.
You have to let go. And it's a
Yeah.
yeah, I hear that. That's
So
awesome. I'm not good
I
at
think
doing that
teaching is,
one.
yeah, you are. You're so good at that. You're so, so good at
Oh,
that.
I
But
am 100. When I preach or speak, I'm like, it's totally planned out.
I have written sermons. I have given some sermons, so I do know that aspect of it. But with kids, and that's the thing, is like with kids, I don't have any inhibitions. And I think that that's probably, I do fully, fully believe that Jesus does speak through children, that purity of heart is the closest to heaven we're going to get. I believe that wholeheartedly. And so I never feel any inhibitions when I speak in front of children.
Mm,
Um,
that's great. That's a good point. Yeah. Um, I want to be careful. I know you got to run. So not to cut things short, but um, uh, yeah, thank you for sharing your story, and for walking on this journey with me. Thanks for coming forward and volunteering. Hint, hint to everybody who's listening. I need you to come forward because it's a lot of work to look for you. So thank you, Amy, for doing that. It's a joy to reconnect with you after so long. So much love to you. Much love to Howie and the girls. Give them my best. And blessings, wonderful news. Congratulations and blessings on your discernment and on your process. And I'll be holding that and holding you in my prayers. So keep us in the loop.
Well, thank you. And I want to just say thank you so much for doing your this podcast. I think this is something that not we don't get to talk about a lot. And I think it's a very important ministry. So I continue to hold you in my prayers for people to come forward and talk with you because everybody's journey is a spiritual journey.
Yeah,
It's a
100%.
it's a to talk about.
Yeah. Well, and again, and I just want to reiterate, like, such a joy. Like, I knew your story, but like not like that. So such a joy to see, and just to see the presence of God in throughout that entire story. I mean, really beautiful, calling and leading, and just, yeah, it's really awesome. So thank you for sharing. I'm gonna hit stop
Thank
and
you.
then actually say goodbye to you. So just hang on a second. But anyway, thank you again.
Okay.
We'll talk to you soon.